So some of the interesting things that we found in terms of giant ragweed emergence is that in the corner soybean rotations, when just corner soybean are in that rotation, we did see a significantly greater number of giant ragweed seedlings that were emerging in those systems when compared to the rotations that had wheat or alfalfa in those treatments, which really tells us that as long as you have a more diverse crop rotation, so having wheat or alfalfa in that system, we saw overall lower levels of emergence. Giant ragweed is an annual weed, so we do tend to see better control of that weed in wheat or other small grains or an alfalfa system. So for instance, alfalfa is a perennial crop. You have increased canopy cover earlier in the growing season, and that's also coinciding when giant ragweed is emerging. So that essentially provides a more hostile environment for those giant ragweed seedlings to be emerging. Keeps that soil temperature cooler, the ragweed seedlings don't emerge as quickly, and you do tend to see lower overall emergence levels of these annual weeds in these perennial systems. So really in terms of overall recommendations that we could make based on this research, if you are someone who does plant alfalfa or wheat, you could maybe think about incorporating those crops into your rotation, especially on fields that might have more problems with giant ragweed. One of the other things we found, however, is that giant ragweed does emerge very early in the growing season, with 95% of that ragweed coming up by the first week of June. So if you think about how else you can control these giant ragweed populations, if you are a conventional farmer and using tillage prior to planting, you could maybe think about pushing that planting date back several weeks, maybe even till the end of May, just to allow more of that giant ragweed to emerge. For instance, if you're going to delay your planting date till May 28th, you see 77% of that giant ragweed has emerged by that time, which then if you're going through with a passive tillage anyway, you're essentially getting 77% giant ragweed control for free, essentially, if you're going to be tilling that field anyway, which leaves you less giant ragweed plants to deal with later on in the season with your post-herbicide applications. And also with that delayed planting date, if you're going to plant soybeans, those soybeans are going to be emerging when the soil is a little bit warmer. You'll have more competitive beans earlier and might compete with those giant ragweed seedlings a little bit more than the earlier planting soybeans.